For centuries, one idea has appeared repeatedly across cultures: the perception that Jewish communities are linked with economic success and influence. But how did this perception begin? Has it always existed, or did it emerge through historical events, migration, religious teachings, and social adaptation? To understand this, we must travel back more than 2,500 years and follow the journey of the Jewish people through ancient empires, medieval kingdoms, diasporas, and modern global society. This is not a story built on stereotypes, exaggeration, or myth. It is a story grounded in historical records, cultural continuity, and the ability of a community to adapt, survive, and progress across centuries. The earliest foundations of Jewish economic life can be traced to 586 BCE, when the Babylonian Empire conquered the Jewish kingdoms in the land of Israel. Many Jews were exiled to Babylon. Before this exile, Jewish society focused largely on agriculture, pastoral life, and small-scale craftsmanship. Their economy was local, land-based, and community-centered. But life in Babylon brought a dramatic change. Suddenly, Jews found themselves in a large imperial economy, surrounded by multicultural trade, commerce, and administrative systems. In this new environment, Jewish communities gradually shifted toward professions such as trade, financial services, and administrative work. Historical evidence from this era confirms this transformation. One of the most important sources is the Marashu Archive, a collection of clay tablets from the 5th century BCE found in ancient Babylon. These records show that many Jewish families were involved in banking, credit, land leasing, and commercial partnerships. These occupations offered more financial stability and required far less physical labor compared to agriculture. Living in an urban commercial economy encouraged skills in accounting, record-keeping, and business management, abilities that would later become essential across centuries. This shift was supported by religious principles within the Torah, the central text of Judaism. The Torah discouraged charging interest when lending to fellow Jews, but permitted interest-based lending to non-Jews. This guideline, written thousands of years ago, later influenced the economic roles of Jewish communities living among foreign populations. In their homeland, where the population was mostly Jewish, this rule had limited application. But in Babylon, surrounded by diverse communities, Jewish lenders could now legitimately participate in interest-based lending within the framework of the religious law. This was not a loophole. It was a legally and religiously acceptable practice at the time, and it shaped the early economic identity of the Jewish diaspora. The Babylonian exile, however, was only the beginning of a long pattern. Centuries later, under the Roman Empire, Jewish communities faced new waves of displacement and migration. As a result, Jewish populations spread widely across the Mediterranean, Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia. The Greek geographer Strabo observed that it had become nearly impossible to travel through the civilized world without encountering Jewish communities. Major urban centers, including Alexandria, Antioch, Athens, and Rome, became home to large Jewish populations. Wherever they settled, Jewish communities developed a unique balance. They preserved their cultural and religious identity through education, tradition, and communal structures. Yet they also integrated into local economies and societies. Roman sources describe Jews engaging in a wide range of occupations. Many worked as merchants, craftsmen, traders, and commercial intermediaries. Their ability to adapt to new markets often led to economic advancement in a relatively short time. One particularly striking example from the Roman period reveals their entrepreneurial approach. Some Jewish investors became involved in the empire's entertainment economy by purchasing and managing gladiators. In modern terms, they acted like talent agents or sports managers. They financed training, arranged performances, and earned profits from public events.
This example reflects a recurring theme across history. Jewish communities tended to identify rising economic sectors early and position themselves strategically. Education played a major role in this success. Jewish religious teachings placed strong emphasis on literacy, ensuring that Jewish males were taught to read and study religious texts. In an age when most of the world was illiterate, Jewish communities had significantly higher literacy rates. Hebrew and Aramaic were commonly spoken languages among Jews, but living across the Mediterranean also led many to learn Greek and Latin, the dominant commercial languages of the period. Literacy offered the tools to manage contracts, accounts, correspondence, and trade negotiations. This multilingual and educated profile made Jewish individuals valuable in trade, administration, and diplomatic communication. By the end of the ancient era, these developments created the foundation of what would eventually become a far-reaching network of Jewish communities engaged in commerce, finance, scholarship, and civic life across many regions of the world.
As the ancient world transitioned into the Middle Ages, Jewish communities found themselves living under different empires, religions, and economic systems. This period brought both challenges and new opportunities. On one hand, Jews faced restrictions, social limitations, and periodic hostility. On the other hand, their economic roles expanded as they adapted to new environments, particularly under Islamic rule and later across Christian Europe. The rise of Islam in the 7th century fundamentally reshaped the political and economic landscape of the Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Europe. Under early Islamic rule, many Jewish communities lived with a degree of stability and were allowed to participate in economic life. Jews played key roles in trade, scholarship, and administration across the Islamic world. Cities such as Baghdad, Cordoba, Damascus, and Cairo became centers of Jewish cultural and intellectual activity. One notable example comes from 11th century Al-Andalus, in present-day Spain. A Jewish scholar named Samuel ibn Nagrella rose to prominence and eventually became the vizier, a high-ranking government minister of the Emirate of Granada. He held this influential position for nearly 30 years. His rise to political leadership was rare for a non-Muslim, and it demonstrated how education, multilingual skills, and administrative talent helped Jewish individuals occupy respected roles in Islamic societies. During this period, many Jewish communities also engaged in long-distance trade. Because Islamic law, like Christian doctrine, prohibited Muslims from charging interest, the role of money lending and financial services was once again filled by minorities, including Jews. Their familiarity with trade, contracts, and accounting made them suitable for such occupations. As a result, Jewish merchants became vital intermediaries between regions such as the Mediterranean, North Africa, and the Middle East. In Christian Europe, the situation was different. While Jews contributed to trade and craftsmanship, they faced stricter social limitations. Beginning in the 12th century, many European Christian societies restricted Jews from owning land or joining many trade guilds. These limitations pushed Jewish communities into professions that were allowed, particularly finance, credit, and money lending. Since the church prohibited Christians from charging interest, Jewish lenders became the primary source of credit for nobles, merchants, and even monarchs. By the 12th and 13th centuries, Jewish moneylenders operated in England, France, Germany, and Italy. These roles made Jewish communities economically necessary, yet socially vulnerable. Their involvement in finance meant they were needed in times of economic difficulty, but also blamed when debts accumulated or economic crises occurred. This would later contribute to waves of anti-Semitism and expulsions in Europe. Meanwhile, a remarkable group of Jewish merchants known as the Radhanites played a unique role in global trade between the 8th and 10th centuries. Operating across Christian and Muslim territories,
They traveled from Spain and France as far as China. Their trade routes linked Europe, the Middle East, Central Asia, and beyond. They were among the rare groups who could cross political and religious borders with relative ease, due to their multilingual abilities, neutral identity, and wide network of Jewish communities across regions. They traded goods such as spices, silk, furs, slaves, and precious metals, and they served as cultural and commercial bridges between civilizations that were often in conflict with each other. However, wealth and financial roles also made Jewish communities targets of resentment. Between the 13th and 15th centuries, European kingdoms expelled Jews multiple times. England expelled its Jews in 1290, France in 1394, Spain in 1492, and Portugal in 1497. These expulsions forced Jewish families to abandon their homes, businesses, and property, often without compensation. Yet each expulsion also resulted in migration, leading to new settlements, new networks, and fresh economic roles in different regions. Despite persecution, Jewish communities continued to adapt with remarkable resilience. Wherever they went, they rebuilt communal life, established schools, maintained cultural traditions, and returned to professions where they could achieve economic stability. This pattern of adversity followed by rebuilding became a defining feature of Jewish history in the Middle Ages. A major turning point occurred after the expulsions from the Iberian Peninsula. Many Sephardic Jews, expelled from Spain and Portugal, migrated to the Ottoman Empire, North Africa, Italy, and parts of the Netherlands. These migrations reshaped Jewish demographics and would eventually contribute to major developments in commerce, culture, and finance in the modern era.
After the expulsions from Spain and Portugal at the end of the 15th century, many Sephardic Jews sought refuge in new lands. A significant number migrated to the Ottoman Empire, where they were permitted to live, work, and participate in economic life. Others settled in cities such as Amsterdam, Antwerp, Livorno, and later London. These migrations shifted the center of Jewish cultural and economic activity toward regions that were becoming leaders of global trade, maritime commerce, and early modern finance. In these new regions, Jewish communities continued to work in professions where literacy, linguistic ability, and trade experience offered advantages. Many became merchants, artisans, doctors, scholars, and financiers. They also played key roles in the spread of printing. The first Hebrew printing presses in several European cities were founded by Jewish immigrants. The tradition of education and literacy remained strong, helping preserve cultural continuity from one generation to the next. By the 17th century, Europe was entering a new commercial and financial era. The rise of maritime trade, colonial expansion, and early stock exchanges transformed the global economy. Jewish merchants and financiers contributed to these developments in various regions. Their experience in long-distance trade, credit, and international correspondence positioned them well to participate in the new economic landscape. Jewish merchants were active in port cities such as Amsterdam, Hamburg, and London. Some played roles in the establishment of the early stock exchanges and trade companies. Their ability to build networks across countries helped facilitate trade routes connecting Europe with the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and the Atlantic world. During this period, Jewish communities became increasingly involved in the diamond trade, textile production, and other specialized industries that required trust-based networks and skilled craftsmanship. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Jewish banking families emerged as key players in European finance. The most well-known of these was the Rothschild family, founded by Mayer Amschel Rothschild in Frankfurt. Through strategic partnerships and a network of family members in major European capitals, the Rothschilds built one of the most influential banking operations of the era. They financed infrastructure projects such as railways, supported the issuance of government bonds, and helped facilitate international financial transactions. Their success became a model that inspired other Jewish banking families, including the Sassoons, Oppenheims, and Warburgs.
The rise of these families, however, represented only a small segment of Jewish society. Many Jewish communities across Europe continued to face poverty, discrimination, and legal restrictions. In Eastern Europe, particularly in Russia and Poland, millions of Jews lived in challenging conditions in communities known as shtetls, with limited economic opportunity and frequent persecution. Between the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a major wave of Jewish migration took place. Approximately 2 million Jews left Eastern Europe due to poverty, anti-Semitism, and political instability. Many migrated to the United States, a country that was rapidly industrializing and expanding its economy. Others migrated to South America, South Africa, Western Europe, and the Middle East. This migration reshaped the global Jewish population and would have a profound influence on the 20th century. In the United States, early Jewish immigrants often arrived with modest means. Many worked in trades such as tailoring, garment manufacturing, and small retail businesses. Over time, through hard work, education, and community support, many achieved upward mobility. A significant number of Jewish entrepreneurs entered the clothing and textile industries in New York, helping shape what would become the American fashion and garment sector. As the American economy grew, Jewish individuals also made notable contributions in academia, science, medicine, law, media, and the arts. By the early 20th century, Jewish entrepreneurs began entering the entertainment industry, which was new and rapidly expanding. Some of the earliest developers of Hollywood's film studios were of Jewish background. These individuals helped shape the emerging film industry into a global cultural force. The mid-20th century was a time of both tragedy and transformation. The Holocaust resulted in the murder of 6 million Jews in Europe and represented one of the darkest chapters in human history. Yet after the Second World War, Jewish communities rebuilt once again. Many survivors migrated to the United States, Israel, and other countries. In the post-war era, Jewish individuals and communities made significant contributions to science, economics, culture, politics, and business. By the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Jewish individuals could be found in leadership positions across various sectors: technology, academia, finance, media, and public life. Jewish scientists, writers, thinkers, innovators, and entrepreneurs contributed to advancements in fields ranging from physics to economics and from medicine to entertainment. Despite representing a small percentage of the global population, currently around 15 million worldwide, Jewish people have had an influence in many areas far beyond their numbers. But how did the perception of Jewish wealth become a widespread idea? The reality is that this perception has historical roots, but it does not represent the full picture. Throughout history, while some Jewish individuals achieved economic success, many others lived in poverty and faced discrimination. The perception of wealth emerged largely because Jews often worked in professions that placed them at the center of economic life: trade, finance, scholarship, and later business and media. These roles often made Jewish individuals visible in influential sectors, even if most lived ordinary lives. It is important to understand this history not through stereotypes, but through the lens of cultural continuity, education, resilience, and adaptation. Jewish communities placed great value on literacy, learning, and communal responsibility. Knowledge was preserved and passed from one generation to the next. Community support systems such as schools, synagogues, and charity institutions helped sustain social and economic stability. These cultural values played a significant role in the long-term development and survival of Jewish communities around the world. Today, the Jewish story continues as a global story. It is a history shaped by adversity and achievement, migration and renewal, tradition and innovation. Understanding this journey provides insight into how a small community has maintained its identity, contributed to many societies, and navigated the challenges of history with resilience and strength.